She thought the Bluetooth speaker was off. That's the part that keeps echoing in my head. She thought it was off. It wasn't. We had a tiny argument that morning. I forget what it was about. Probably dishwasher settings or the way I breathe wrong. She left for brunch with her friends. Slammed the door like she was the injured party, like I'd ruined her day by asking if she could maybe put her shoes in the closet instead of the middle of the hallway. Whatever. I stayed behind, opened my laptop to work on a freelance project. But before I sat down, I noticed she'd forgotten her Bluetooth speaker was still connected to her phone. She always plays voice messages through it in the kitchen. That's when it started. Her voice. Loud, echoing from the kitchen counter. Laughing. Then her friend asked, "So what's the plan with Daniel?" "My name is Caleb." And Lindsay answered, clear as day, "If I had a better option, I'd have left Caleb long ago." Then they laughed. I froze. The voice notes kept playing, one after another. Apparently, they were sending audios back and forth in some chaotic group chat. Her voice said things like, "He's just so soft. He folds like laundry when I pout. Daniel's wife's in Denver this weekend, so you know what that means. I'll fake a headache later and go to the gym. Caleb won't ask." They laughed again. I stood in the hallway listening to my wife plan her lies like it was meal prep. Just casual, routine betrayal. She didn't know the speaker was still on. She didn't know her phone was broadcasting every disgusting word across our kitchen. And I didn't stop it. I opened the voice memos app on my phone and hit record. I let it capture everything. Every insult. Every moan in one of the audio clips that followed. Every time she said Daniel's name like she was 17 again. And then I waited. When she got home 4 hours later, she was humming. I had dinner on the table. Her favorite. Rosemary chicken. Real candles. No sarcasm. She looked confused, almost guilty. "What's the occasion?" she asked. I handed her the speaker. Pressed play. Watched her face fold in on itself like a cheap tent. And I said, "Now you have no options. Be gone by tonight." She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't done. Because what she didn't know was that Daniel's wife. She called me first. The silence after I hit play was deafening. Her hand hovered in the air like she didn't know whether to grab the speaker or throw it through the window. Her mouth opened twice, once like she was going to laugh it off, and again like she might beg. But instead, she just stared at the blinking blue light and listened to her own voice betray her. I sat across from her and watched. No yelling, no dramatic accusations, just a quiet kind of rage burning in my chest that felt worse than anything loud. Her voice echoed from the speaker, cheerful and disgusting. "Daniel's wife is clueless. Men like that shouldn't be wasted on women who wear Crocs in public." And then her friends laughing, egging her on. I couldn't believe this was the woman I had married, who I had defended, supported, made sacrifices for. She finally muttered, "I didn't know it was connected." That's it. That was her big defense. Like the issue was the technology, not the affair, not the humiliating way she talked about me, not the fact she described me as low-maintenance wallpaper who wouldn't notice if the house burned down unless it took the TV with it. I didn't say a word. I just got up and walked to the hallway closet and handed her a duffel bag. I'd packed it during one of the voice memos when she said she was thinking of taking a break, not from cheating, but from our marriage. I handed her the bag like I was giving someone their coat after a long party. Nothing left to discuss. She whispered, "Where am I supposed to go?" And that's when I lost it. Not by yelling, but with the most pathetic line I've ever said in my life. "Maybe your better option has a guest room." She didn't cry. I thought she might. She always cried in arguments before. But now, her face just shifted into something colder. Angry. Like I was the one who hurt her. She said, "You're seriously going to kick me out over a stupid speaker?" That sentence did something to me. It snapped something. I walked over to the drawer where we keep the phone chargers and pulled out the note I'd written her 3 weeks ago, the one I never gave her. I was going to surprise her on our anniversary. In it, I'd written how I wanted to renew our vows. How I'd been saving up to take her to Vermont in the fall, her dream trip to see the leaves change. I'd even called in favors from clients to get us a cabin. I slid it across the table and said, I was going to propose again. She read one line, then folded it shut like it was trash. And then, she did the unthinkable. She called Daniel. Right there, on speaker. She didn't even step outside. He didn't pick up. She called again, straight to voicemail. And again. And that's when I knew. Daniel wasn't answering because he already knew. And she had no idea yet. Because what Lindsay didn't know was that 24 hours ago, Daniel's wife messaged me. She had screenshots, photos, receipts, and a plan. And I said yes. Lindsay finally stopped calling after the 5th time Daniel didn't answer. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Her face caught somewhere between confusion and dread. I could see her starting to connect the dots. It wasn't just me who knew. Something was wrong on that side too. She turned to me and asked, "Did you talk to him?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window like we were done here. Like this conversation wasn't even worth finishing. But inside, my heart was pounding like I was about to detonate something I couldn't take back. Here's what happened. It was around 2 a.m., the night before when I got a message request on Facebook. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But it wasn't. It was from Emily Masters, Daniel's wife. The message was short. Brutal. "I think our spouses are sleeping together. I have proof. Do you want it?" She attached a single photo, blurry but unmistakable. Lindsay and Daniel, at a bar downtown, his hand on her thigh, her hand on his wrist, her head thrown back mid-laugh, like this was the most natural thing in the world. I don't even remember breathing after that. We messaged back and forth all night. Turns out she'd been suspicious for months. She'd hired a part-time PI, someone who tracked Daniel's location via Apple CarPlay logs, restaurant reservations, even toll booth records. She had screenshots, timestamps, GPS routes, everything. And she was tired of playing victim. So was I? So we made a plan. And that's why I didn't scream when Lindsay tried to gaslight me. That's why I didn't freak out when she called Daniel like he was going to come rescue her. Because I knew exactly where Daniel was. With his wife. Emily had flown back early from Denver. She landed that morning. She picked him up from the airport herself. He hadn't even checked his phone yet. And in 1 hour, she was going to walk into our house with him. With me waiting, Lindsay caught in her own lies, and everything recorded. I had the Bluetooth speaker running for a reason. Lindsay still didn't know. She sat at the table, trying to come up with a new strategy, a new lie, another version of the story where she's the misunderstood one. She actually said, "Maybe we can go to therapy or something." I laughed. I don't think I'd ever laughed like that before. It wasn't joyful. It was hollow, like air escaping a tire. I said, "Sure. Group therapy. The 4 of us." She frowned. "What do you mean?" And just then, headlights pulled into the driveway. 2 doors opened. Footsteps. Lindsay stood up, her face pale, mascara cracked under her eyes like old paint. Then the doorbell rang. Lindsay didn't move at first. She just stood there, staring at the front door like it might dissolve if she blinked fast enough. I watched her shoulders twitch, the way someone flinches when they realize the knock isn't just in their head. She whispered, "Is that?" I didn't answer. The doorbell rang again. This time, I walked over and opened it slowly, letting the cold air rush in. And there they were, Daniel, with that same smug, tired face I'd only seen in vacation photos Lindsay used to like on Facebook, and Emily, his wife, standing beside him with a look that could pierce steel. She held a manila folder in one hand and her phone in the other, already recording. Daniel looked confused, like he'd just walked into the wrong movie. He saw Lindsay and stopped mid-step. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Emily was the first to speak. Her voice was calm, cold. "Hi, Lindsay. Looks like your little gym schedule got mixed up." Lindsay's face crumpled instantly. Her hand went to her neck, that nervous habit of hers, tugging at the chain she always wore. "Emily, this isn't," Daniel told me. "No." Emily cut in, holding up her phone. "Daniel didn't tell you anything. Because Daniel's a coward." Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "Can we do this somewhere else?" But Emily stepped inside, right into our living room. She turned the camera toward the couch, toward me, toward Lindsay. "No, we're doing it here, right now." And then she dropped the manila folder on the coffee table. Pages spilled out, photos, receipts, texts, even a printout of a DoorDash order from the hotel they'd used last month. Under the name Brenda H. Lindsay started breathing hard, like she was going to faint. Daniel muttered, "This is insane. This is a setup." Emily didn't flinch. "Oh, you think this is a setup? You had the spaghetti carbonara on November 3rd, Daniel. You said you were gluten-free." That line nearly killed me. Not because of the pasta, but because I had cooked gluten-free for Lindsay for the past 2 years. Because she said her stomach couldn't handle anything else. And yet, There she was, sharing pasta with another man, while I made her lentils and zucchini back home. Lindsay sat down, finally. No tears. Just stunned, empty silence. Daniel turned to her and hissed. You told me he wouldn't find out. You said you had it under control. And that was it. That was the sentence. The one that made me feel like I'd been living in someone else's joke. Emily looked at me and said, Do you want to press charges? Because I do. I shook my head. Not yet. I wasn't done. I picked up my phone, opened the voice recording app, and hit play. The Bluetooth speaker clicked on, and once again, Lindsay's voice filled the room. This time, he's just convenient. He won't do anything, even if he finds out. Daniel's jaw dropped. Lindsay finally whispered, I didn't know you recorded that. I turned to her slowly. You didn't know a lot of things. And then, I looked at Emily. She nodded. Because what Lindsay didn't know was that Emily wasn't here just to expose her. She was here because we had something bigger planned. And Lindsay had just walked right into it. Lindsay sat frozen on the edge of the couch. Her lips parted like she wanted to form a defense, but the words never came. Daniel paced near the doorway, glancing back at it like escape was still an option. But it wasn't. The room felt heavy, electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Only this time, I wasn't the one begging for clarity. I had it now, and it was hers that was slipping. Emily placed her phone on the table, still recording. She looked at me, and for a second, there was this strange, unspoken understanding. Two people who had been reduced to spectators in their own marriages now finally stepping behind the curtain. I turned to Lindsay and said, You remember that charity gala last month? The one you said you couldn't attend because you were mentally drained? You remember how guilty I felt for going alone? She nodded weakly. I still not meeting mine. Well, Emily was there. She was on the committee. We met at the bar, talked for an hour about our distant spouses while sipping sparkling water and pretending everything was normal. It wasn't. Lindsay blinked, realizing this wasn't just about catching her. It was about flipping the entire board. Emily chimed in, her voice steady, almost clinical. We started comparing notes. It wasn't hard to find overlap. Same weekends, same stories, same lies. You two weren't even clever. Daniel sat down finally, rubbing his face. What do you want? You want us to apologize? We get it, we messed up. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how small and pathetic he looked. The guy Lindsay nearly ruined her life for couldn't even own his decisions. No backbone, just a handsome bag of air. No, I said, we don't want an apology. We want acknowledgement. Full and public. You two treated us like placeholders, like background noise while you played dress-up in your little fantasy. Emily reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of printed pages. Lindsay looked at them and immediately blanched. They were screenshots, not just of texts, but of every conversation Lindsay had ever had with Daniel on her phone, synced through her email. Somehow, Emily had gotten access. I don't know how. Maybe through Daniel. Maybe through a password Lindsay never changed. It didn't matter. You said I was spineless, I said, my voice cracking despite how hard I tried to sound firm. You said I'd never leave because I was too emotionally dependent on you. But here we are. Emily added, You'll both be signing these tonight. Joint statements. Acknowledging the affair. Naming names. Time frames. Places. You won't lose anything yet. It's just in case. Think of it as insurance. Daniel scoffed. You can't force us to do that. Emily looked directly at him, her voice dropping to something cold and measured. Actually, I can. I have copies of the expense reports you filed under fake client meetings. Your firm might be interested in that. Lindsay's head snapped toward him. You used your business card? He didn't answer. I stood. You always said you'd leave me if you found someone better. So now's your chance. Go be with your better option, Lindsay. But just know, he's already under someone else's control. She looked back and forth between us, like she was seeing the room for the first time. And then she said it, the most desperate, pathetic thing I've ever heard her say. What if I made a mistake? I stared at her, and for the first time in this entire mess, I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel betrayal. I didn't even feel pity. I felt done. You didn't make a mistake, I said. You made a choice, and now you live in it. She said nothing. Daniel said nothing. Emily smiled, not with joy, but with closure. And then we handed them the pens. They both signed. Lindsay's hands were shaking as she scribbled her name across the bottom of the page. Daniel didn't even read the statement. He just signed it with a dramatic sigh, as if the act itself was beneath him, like he still believed this would all blow over by morning. He had no clue that Emily had already blind copied 3 different attorneys. Just in case. Once the papers were in hand, Emily calmly placed them into a folder, zipped her purse, and turned toward the door. But not before she said something that left the whole room frozen. "Oh, and just so you know," she said, addressing Daniel without even looking at him, "I spoke with your company's ethics board yesterday. You should probably prepare for an audit." He choked out a what? But she was already walking out. Lindsay turned to me, her face flushed, her voice desperate. "You don't have to go through with this. I was stupid, okay? I got lost. You were always there for me, and I just didn't appreciate it. But I do now. I should have felt something. Anger, regret, triumph. Instead, I felt numb." She kept talking, stringing together half-sincere apologies, half-excuses about how Daniel was just a distraction, how she never really saw a future with him, that she just wanted to feel noticed again, that I had pulled away first. But I couldn't even process it. My mind was elsewhere, on all the nights I made her dinner while she worked late, on the time I drove 2 hours to pick up her mother from a hospital appointment she forgot, on the anniversary she skipped to help a friend move. Every moment I bent myself into knots to be dependable, while she twisted that into weakness. "I begged you," I said finally quietly. "I begged you to talk to me when things felt off. You made me feel like a burden, like I was the reason you were fading. And the whole time, it was you." She stepped forward. "But I didn't leave. That has to mean something, right?" And there it was. That one sentence. That one awful sentence. I didn't leave. I almost laughed. "That's the bar now. Not leaving. You stayed because you didn't have a better option," I said. "Not because you loved me." She opened her mouth, but I was already walking away. For the first time in forever, I didn't want her to follow. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed that used to be ours and stared at the closet. Half of it was hers. Still full. Still smug. Still humming with the scent of her perfume. I picked up my phone and opened the Airbnb app. I wasn't going to stay in that house a second longer than I needed to. Let her sleep in the silence she made. 30 minutes later, I wheeled my suitcase past her without a word. She stood by the door, arms crossed, like she expected one last conversation. But I didn't give her one. And as I walked out into the cold night, something strange happened. I didn't cry. For the first time in weeks, I didn't cry. But I also didn't feel free. Not yet. Because freedom wasn't just walking away from her. It was what came next. And neither of them saw that coming. It took exactly 6 days for the silence to crack. I had checked into a modest Airbnb, one of those strange modern townhouses with no personality but clean white counters and a coffee machine that made me feel slightly human in the mornings. I wasn't eating well. Sleep came in fits. But for the first time in forever, I wasn't living in someone else's lie. On the 7th day, I got the first text from Lindsay. "You're overreacting." That was it. No punctuation. No apology. Just those 3 words, as if everything that happened could be boiled down to some emotional tantrum I'd eventually get over. I didn't reply. Later that night, she sent another message. "Daniel dumped me." There it was. I read it 3 times. Out loud. And I smiled. Not out of cruelty. Not because I wanted her to suffer, even after everything. But because I finally saw the truth for what it was. She had never chosen me. She had just lost him. Emily had followed through. Hard. Daniel didn't just get an internal audit. He got fired. Word got out. Their affair wasn't just a betrayal. It became a professional disgrace. His clients pulled out. His license was flagged. And Daniel, brilliant Daniel, decided to save his own reputation by throwing Lindsay under the bus. He told everyone it was her idea, that she manipulated him, that she was unstable. And Lindsay, who had always been the one with control, with charm, with her carefully curated image of perfection, was suddenly reduced to a liability. Even Amanda and the rest of her gossip crew distanced themselves. No more wine nights. No more group texts with winking emojis and cruel laughs. Just silence. It wasn't revenge. Not really. I hadn't lifted a finger. She had burned everything with her own hands. But what I did do, quietly and without a word, was cancel the lease renewal on the car she drove. It was in my name. She'd always insisted on luxury, always mocked my beat-up Toyota like it was some embarrassing extension of my personality. So I let her drive that embarrassment now. Hers, not mine. I also called our mutual bank and split the accounts. Everything I'd saved, the Vermont trip fund, the emergency savings, even the rainy day stash in the jar behind the rice bags, I pulled it all. Legally, carefully, without malice, but with purpose. And then, I mailed her something. Just a single envelope. Inside, I placed a printed copy of the note I'd once written her. The one where I told her I wanted to renew our vows, the one I never gave her. At the bottom, I'd scrawled a line by hand. You were right. I was easy to keep. No return address. She didn't text after that. But 2 days later, I got a message from Amanda, her old best friend. You really broke her. She cries all the time now. Doesn't eat. Doesn't leave the house. I barely recognize her. And I sat there, holding my phone, feeling something strange. It wasn't victory. Not pride. Not satisfaction. It was emptiness. Like revenge had rung the bell, but no one had come to the door. But that night, as I scrolled through my inbox, something changed. A new message appeared. From Emily. 3 words. You free Friday? I almost didn't reply. Emily's message sat in my inbox for over an hour while I stared at it from the kitchen counter, sipping coffee that had gone cold without me noticing. My heart didn't race the way it used to when Lindsay texted. There wasn't anxiety, or dread, or that desperate urge to please. Just a question. Am I ready for anything normal again? I typed, sure, then paused, then deleted it, then retyped. Yeah, I think I am. We met at a little diner just outside the city. Nothing fancy. No expectations. No pressure. Just 2 people who had both been broken in different, but strangely parallel ways. Emily wore a sweatshirt and jeans. No makeup. No walls. She looked tired, but free. We didn't talk about Daniel. We didn't talk about Lindsay. Not at first. Instead, we talked about things like how she used to foster rescue dogs. How she once hiked in Colorado alone for 3 days and came home with a sprained ankle and a story about being chased by a raccoon. I told her about my failed attempt to grow tomatoes on our apartment balcony. About the time I once tried to surprise Lindsay with a piano lesson and wound up in a room full of 7-year-olds. We laughed. Not the forced kind. The real kind. The kind that you forget you're capable of after months of being gutted from the inside out. Eventually, the conversation circled back to everything we'd been through. We didn't dwell on it. We didn't pick at the wounds. We just acknowledged that we'd survived. And somehow, that felt like enough. A few weeks passed. Then a few more. Lindsay never reached out again. Her parents came by the house to collect her things while I wasn't there. They left me a note. Handwritten, shaky, apologetic. I didn't keep it. Daniel, I heard through Emily, had moved back in with his brother 2 states over. Last anyone knew, he was reapplying for his real estate license under a different name. Me? I finally booked that trip to Vermont. Not out of spite. Not to prove anything. I just needed to see the leaves change. To remind myself that seasons end, and so do people. But there's always something after. The air was cold, crisp. The colors were unreal. I stood on the edge of a trail, wind in my face, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. I didn't feel like a mistake someone tolerated. I didn't feel like an option waiting to be replaced. I felt like a man who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. And as the sun set through a line of red gold trees, my phone buzzed. A photo from Emily. 2 mugs. 1 book. 1 golden retriever curled at her feet. Room for 1 more, she wrote. I smiled. And for once, it didn't hurt to say yes.